regardless of what function we're carrying, how it's all going, we said we're here for it.
We did.
And we're in it together.
We are.
Well, hey.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm a little sleepy.
You're a little sleepy. Why are you sleepy?
Somebody snored last night.
That's not fun. We didn't say anything about you bringing that up.
I know.
I'm trying to figure out what to do with my arms in this chair. Last one I looked at, I was like, what am I doing? I look like I don't know what I look like. I was like, what has happened? Well, I'm sorry I kept you up last night.
You did. I mean,
sinuses are a real thing.
Yeah. I'm not sure when this is going to air, but we have been on the baseball field every night, and when you snore, nobody gets any sleep.
That sounds like something we need to work through.
We can talk about that on the episode.
No, I don't want to talk about that on any episode.
Because I think part of what we're going to talk about is what it's like to be on the other side of you.
Oh, not on the other side of you, on the other side of you. No, we've had a good time. Thank you for all the feedback that we've gotten, all the people that have responded. I want to give a shout out.
Yes. Tanner Hoyt.
Yep.
Wrote us handwritten
a
note.
Yes.
Just giving us some positive feedback. And so shout out to Tanner and his wife, Brittany.
Yep.
Which they've been a part of Open Door, and just so grateful for the feedback. It's nice to know that somebody listens.
That's right. Always nice to know. And we haven't gotten canceled yet.
We have not. It is our own podcast, so.
Yeah, that's true.
We'll keep doing it.
For sure.
Yeah.
But no, anything that you guys have questions about, insight, we'd love to hear your feedback. You can obviously subscribe online. You can email us questions, comments. We love all the information. But hopefully,
and a handwritten note.
And
love that.
Oh, absolutely. Lauren's love language is intentionality.
It was very intentional.
Yeah. And so very grateful for that. And just hope this is helping us on our journey as we kind of walk this out. I know it's helping us.
It is.
Yes, it is. Indeed. We're trying to bring back True That.
I think you're trying to bring that back.
Yeah, it's an uphill battle for sure. This week, we're going to kind of take a little bit different of a track. Wanted to hit a different topic this week. And so why don't you set it up a little bit and we can talk through it.
So I think one of the things that we got when we polled the staff of what are some things they'd like for us to talk about, not necessarily be experts on by any means. And so it kind of fit within the bucket of, I guess, leadership. Mm-hmm. And it was, I think, how to deal with, I don't know, I can't remember if it was how to lead difficult people or if it was how to deal with difficult people.
Maybe it was just difficult people.
In general, because we all deal with them.
Oh.
And we all are them from time to time.
Indeed.
So that's kind of what we're going to be talking through today.
Yeah, and so we kind of wanted to start out, because we do all deal with difficult relationships. We all have difficult people in our life, people that rub us the wrong way, people that trigger us. Occasionally we're married to them. And in fact, I would say most of the time, that's probably the hardest relationship that we have. But how do we process that in the right way? And I think that's really the challenge. And I think ministry, there's a lot of people that are in ministry that listen to this podcast as well. And so ministry has some complexities with it that maybe go beyond just like if you're in a working relationship with somebody that's just difficult. But how do we walk that process out? And the first thing that we really wanted to talk about when it came to this specific subject is I think whenever you're navigating a person, you have to really start biblically is kind of what our perspective would be, is think about how it feels to be on the other side of you.
Dun, dun, dun.
Instead of just thinking about it from a perspective of yourself.
Yeah.
How does it feel to be on the other end of you? Because I would just be honest in saying I'm a difficult person.
I don't know that I would say you're a difficult person. I would say for the most part, overall, you're pretty easygoing. I think there are certain things you're very particular on or peculiar about that maybe aren't so easygoing. But I would say overall, your nature's pretty, I think you're pretty likable.
Yeah, well, I think you're pretty likable most of the time. But I think that all of us in certain situations, especially with certain personalities, we become more difficult as well.
Yeah.
And I think like that's the reality is like in our line of work, it's funny when you start really digging into different personality types, when you start dealing with different ministry types, fivefold ministry gifts, all those things. It's interesting how some of those really do.
Like they butt heads.
They butt heads
Yeah.
really hard. And it's easy at that level when you start butting heads with somebody for it to go uber personal.
Yeah.
Instead of realize, hey, there's just probably some differences of personality. And I think that shows up. I mean, we've talked about this honestly in marriage and in previous podcasts, but we can't really reiterate it enough. We've been married 20 years. We've been together 25 years. And the truth is, Lauren and I, we're very different people. Mm-hmm. I mean, extremely different in a lot of ways. And God put us together to sharpen each other, but we have to lean in towards each other for that actually to take place. Mm-hmm. And that's really hard when you go through seasons of pain. There's nobody that's harder on me than you. There's nobody that expects more of me than you expect. There's nobody that says truth to me like you say it, which is not always easy to hear.
It doesn't always come out well.
Yeah, and I mean, and there's places where you've tried to work on that. You've tried to gotten, and you have gotten better at it. But even in that, in the heat of the moment, in the times that we are passionately dealing with something, I mean, the truth is, like, it still comes out.
Yeah.
And so I think that in many ways, when we lean into that, it makes us stronger. When I accept that as God's gift to me, then it actually makes me better. So that's within marriage. I also think the same thing within team. I think the same thing within people. And how do we then begin to lean into, if you will, some things that make us upset, that occasionally prick us the wrong way, so that we can get the benefit out of the relationship?
Yeah, I think especially in a working context, whether you're proximity working close to people, you might not be on the same team, or you might be on the same team, and so you're with that person or persons a lot more than even maybe you're a family at home. Because I mean, not everybody, but generally I'd say people. Now this is probably before 2020. I know after 2020 a lot
Things
more
changed
people
a lot.
work from home and that sort of thing. But before 2020, I mean, you would work in an office from 9 to 5, 8 to 5, and a majority of your day was spent around people. And depending on where you work, where you live, I mean, that comes with that could come with a lot of different personality types. I mean, the biggest tester of differences in personalities, I think, come from if you are working on a project together. Because you're all coming to the table with different expectations of, just like how we've shared. And I know it's a silly example, but just like how we shared with working on this podcast together.
Oh, yeah.
Your definition of showing up prepared and my definition of showing up prepared are, they're different.
Yeah.
And I think when you're on a team with somebody, it can be easy, especially for somebody who's maybe, I would say, a 1 on the Enneagram. There's a right and a wrong way. For those types of personalities, it can be really difficult to work on a team with people, because in your mind, unless you're really mature in your mind, that you have there's a right way and a wrong way.
Yeah.
And if we're not careful, we can, in our inner critic or critical, being judgmental, we can say that the wrong way is just making it the wrong person. And I just don't think that always works out.
Yeah, and the best things that we do, whether it be in a work environment, whether it be at home, is the word that Lauren and we use a lot, and that's collaboration.
Yeah.
We really want to collaborate, whether it is in disciplining our children, whether it's in financially at home, whether it's in the workplace. We want to, in many ways, force collaboration. We don't want to it's really easy for, within the family dynamic, within the marriage dynamic, us go to our separate corners, especially in the work dynamic. Just tell me what I need to do. Let me work on my project by myself.
Yeah.
but yet the best things come through collaboration. And if you're actually going to collaborate, which is a high EQ, thing. The best, most efficient people, highest emotional intelligence knows how to collaborate, knows how to work with. But if you're going to do that, it means that you're going to be put in situations that are difficult, and managing personalities, managing emotions, managing all of those things are really what is key to working with people. And I just thought it's a great question. How do you work with or deal with difficult people? But the truth is, the reality of the question would be, how do you just deal with people? Mm-hmm. Because in reality, we're all difficult and we all struggle in our own way. And I promise that if you're not difficult to everyone, you're difficult to someone. And that's really the truth is like people find it difficult to work with me. And, and I for years, I was confused by that. I was like, how can you, I feel like I'm easygoing, like you would say. But at times there's a group of people that just wishes I was just more clear, mm-hmm. that just wishes, would you just make a decision so that we can fall in line? And I'm like, well, that's not what I want you to do. I don't want you to fall in line. I want us to collaborate together. And I think that in our culture today, we really struggle with face-to-face communication.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And that's really what we wanted to lean this to, is that how do you deal with difficult people? How do you work with people? How do you deal with that? Well, you're going to have to develop really this skill called confrontation.
Yeah. We're in the middle of trying to teach our boys how to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in their generations, their Gen Z and Gen Alpha. Everything is done. I just had a conversation with our youngest, and I was like, you need to go ask the question. And
it was with a coach.
Yeah. And he was like, well, can't you just text him? And I was like, no.
Literally, we're sitting there, we're like, you need to go have a face-to-face conversation. He's like, well, can you just text him?
Can you text him?
I'm like, what are you?
And then he
said,
my Lord. Well, can I just text him? I was like, no, honey. You have to learn how to communicate face-to-face. And it is a scary thing, I think, because most people don't want to feel rejected. Mm. So you don't know what you're always going to be met with on the other side. But I genuinely believe it is a skill that you have to learn. It's not something that comes easy to anybody. So for somebody to say confrontation is really easy, I just don't buy that. I think it's a skill that you've developed and a muscle that you've stretched, but it's not something that when you're young, it's just something that comes natural. You have to practice it.
Yeah. One of the things that we wanted to kind of lean into when we start talking about this is really seeking to understand how the person that you're struggling with, especially in the work context, especially in the marriage context, can we really begin to understand their makeup, how they're built, their story, so we become curious about them, their personality type. One of the things that this culture is all about, and I think it has shifted a lot since 2020. I think we'll be talking about for years how much shifted in our culture from COVID and that season. But I think our culture is so enamored with discovering themselves that they actually never get out of discovering themselves and start looking with curiosity to those God's brought around them.
Yeah.
And so there is that place that, like, when you're on a team, like, part of your responsibility, especially with your spouse, is to really begin to learn and ask questions to understand and to learn.
And not assume.
Instead of what you call assumicide.
No, I think you came up with that, or somebody came up with that. I did not.
Yeah, I think.
I don't know where that came from, but.
Yeah, I think so often if we're not careful, we get in this place where we start assuming intent. We start assuming, and that's really we talked about it in our attachment styles. I can assume a lot.
Yeah, kind of filling in the blanks.
Yeah, that's right. Even from facial expressions, even emotions, even curt pass-by conversations, instead of really discovering and trying to understand the person that we're working with.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say I learned that the hard way in college, but I definitely had a manager at one point. It was one of my first jobs. I was maybe a freshman in college, but I worked at, I don't even know what it's called now, but it used to be called the Pulse.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's FiQuest now, maybe, but working there and having a manager who was a male. And so I'm not looking for friendship, but I was just looking for some kind of like a nicety of some sort. And I just felt like for whatever reason, he just hated me. And I was like, what did I do to this guy? I mean, I'm like 18, 19 years old. He was probably in his 30s and just flat out rude, in my opinion. And I remember just almost dreading going there and not really understanding. And then I found out like way on later down the road, he had some family things that he was dealing with. And so I think the mistake I made when I was that young was assuming that it was against me personally, instead of understanding that there was a whole situation he was trying to navigate in his own life that had absolutely nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
But instead of being a mature person and asking like, hey, I just like, are we okay? Or is there something I can do different? Even in a work setting.
Which is confrontation.
Yes. Confrontation doesn't always have to be this like huge ordeal. It can just be having enough courage to just ask the question. And I think that's really where you have to start.
Yeah.
Is instead of filling all the blanks, instead of letting all this time go on. I mean, I could have saved a year of my life of thinking
stress and anxiety.
This manager hated me.
Yeah.
And it just really wasn't the case. I mean, he probably didn't even know my name. I mean, it just was that situation. But I remember learning that and feeling that like, oh gosh, I feel like such an idiot.
Yeah.
So that was probably my first introduction of realizing there's a whole lot of things happening on the other side of somebody that are probably have nothing to do with you, or they might.
Yeah. And I mean, it's honestly like, we talked in our first podcast too about our wiles, worries, wishes, wounds, but in truth, we do that with our family and we do that with our team. And what we're really always fighting for with people on our team is we're fighting for their heart. We're trying to get past the layers of whatever the emotion is. We live in a high-stress job. Ministry is crazy at times. There's a lot of feels and all kinds of stuff that goes on. But we're always fighting, trying to get to what is the heart of the matter so that we're not getting just stuck in the emotions of what is or we're coming out of Easter, when we're recording this, and it was a great day. But within that, there's so much going on and emotions can run so high.
Yeah.
And so really having those honest conversations before there's so much assumption that we've taken on that then we're going into it with our gun loaded.
That's right.
And that's the hardest thing. That's why we talk about so often, even with couples, about like keep short accounts with each other, like unpack with each other, because the longer you go without unpacking, the more passive aggressive both of you will become.
Oh yeah, then it explodes.
And then it explodes. And so then we're not confronting, trying to come back into unity. We're confronting to reject. Somebody finally gets to the place that they get pushed far enough that now rejection is going to be in the confrontation. And that's just not godly confrontation. And I would say that's in marriage, but that's also in our work. That's also in any of those relationships with believers.
I mean, I think, I don't know if you said it on this podcast or I know you said it before on stage, but you say it a lot of what we don't confront, we reject.
Yeah.
And I think especially in a working environment, it's not that we all have to get along all the time. It's not that we all have to be.
And we don't have to see eye to eye.
We don't have to. But I think the biggest lie that we can tell ourselves is I can work with this person even though I'm not okay with them.
Come on, talk about that.
I think, now, keep in mind, this is off the heels of reading
Bait of Satan.
Bait of Satan.
How
John
epic of
Bevere book.
John Bevere book. If you want to just feel really convicted, let's put it that way.
How many people can I call today and
de
apologize?
I mean, how epic of a name is that? Bait of Satan.
Bait of Satan.
Bait of Satan coming to a theater near you.
I'm not saying I recommend that book. It is a good book. I just think it's like a lot of John Bevere books. And if you've read any of his books, there's things that...
For a black and white person, you love it.
Yes, but I have to be careful that I don't. Like, it can be very... it can pull me even more into the black and white and not gray. But in a lot of ways, I think what he does do well in that book is he does open up your eyes to when you're holding on to a fence, when you're taking that bait per se, that the enemy wants you to pick up and he wants you to be offended, not just with your spouse, but with other believers in the church, is it impacts you. It impacts your filter from hearing from the Lord. So it's not just
Well, you become a Pharisee. I mean, the truth is offense makes you a Pharisee and a Sadducee.
Yeah. So I think if we're not careful, we think in our minds, because it's easier not to confront, it's easier to not just use the word address things and just in our minds pretend like we're okay, but we're really not great. And then it just goes on and on and on and on. And then before you know it, it's like somebody else can do something and you're like mad as fire about it. And you're like, why am I so mad about this? And then you have to go back to, oh, well, I've really been carrying this resentment for a year.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's,
I would say most of the time, it can get projected on other people. And I think that's what,
so good.
If we're not self-aware enough to realize, like, I'm really stressed out about this, or I'm really offended with this person in my family about this, but really I'm projecting it onto people at work. That's not good.
A lot of times, I mean, and this is speaking from my own brokenness, but a lot of times my kids have caught the resentment and offense that I either held against you or held against somebody else.
Yeah.
They get it projected on them.
And I think I'm sure there's some kind of psychology term for it, but
I'm sure
we can project that onto those that we think
can handle it
and won't, or that we just feel, I guess, safe around because we feel like they love us unconditionally, that it won't matter, instead of taking it to the appropriate person. Yeah,
I think let's talk about it for a second. We didn't have this in our notes, but I think so often in our life,
off script.
We're going off the script. Can you imagine?
We
should have called it off script. I think a lot of times when I look back on our relationship, the seasons that were the hardest, yes, there were external factors that were going on, but the truth is we were battling resentment. I don't know if I'd call it all the way bitterness, but I'd definitely call it resentment or unforgiveness towards each other. And didn't really know how to communicate it and get our hearts back open towards each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's in a relationship that traditionally we've wanted that. Now, I don't think that all the time. I think there's been times where, like, one of us was like, I'm going to be mad, daggone it, and I'm going to be mad, and I'm going to be happy about it for a second. I mean, give me my ability to be mad. But I think that so often in our life, if we're not careful, we really don't keep our hearts tender towards each other.
Yeah, we become hard-hearted.
We become hard-hearted, and I would say that, like, that has a tendency to happen between myself and other people that work with us or in our church or other friends. I mean, we live in a culture that it's just very easy for our hearts to begin to shrink and for it to become hard and get jaded. And instead of fighting for relationship, many times it's just become easier to withdraw from it and kind of cut that person off and move on.
Yeah. Or block them or just avoid them altogether.
Yeah, and I think our ask or our real our hearts are to say, hey, is it really worth that? I mean, I think that's what the book, again, Bait of Satan, I think that's what he does a really good job at, is he gets you to understand that it's not. Yeah.
Like, it's really not. Like, I don't think me or you or anybody else is saying, like, hey, address this issue or whatever, confront this person because you're going to be best friends with them.
No.
It's not that. It's to get you to get over yourself.
Yeah.
And even if you're 10% wrong and the other person's 90% wrong, it's you have to get over yourself.
One of my favorite scriptures is in John, and it says literally Jesus didn't trust them because he knew what was in their heart. And I mean, that sounds pretty straight up. I mean, it's pretty amazing scripture that Jesus ministered to him. He just didn't trust them. And I think there's that place where if we're not careful, we give our heart away to people that don't know how to steward our heart. And so then we get offended when they don't steward it well.
Yeah.
And so I would, in all of this is like, let's choose our friends wisely. Let's choose those that we are accountable to wisely. Let's choose these core relationships wisely so that when we are in relationship with people in different layers of our life, we're appropriately giving our heart away, not inappropriately giving our heart away. Not everything has to be personal.
Right.
And I think that, so often, like in my life as a pastor and some of the greatest mistakes I made is I put people's praise at the same level as your praise, or the crowd's thoughts about me at the same level as those that are my mentors or closest thoughts to me. And I really had to do some hard work in my life to put in correct category different people's thoughts about me based in the importance of how much they knew me. And it really then helped protect my heart so that I wasn't picking up offenses everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really key in our life. And so when we work with somebody, they might not be your best friend. That's okay. But we're going to make sure that we have relationship to the best that we can.
Yeah, appropriately.
So that we can collaborate and work together. One of the things we talked about, though, is in church, because we do have a bunch of people in ministry that do listen to this, and this is something we've learned over time. Okay, and so this is just real. So if you're not a part of, like, if you're not on church staff or whatever, and that's not your world, well, you're just going to get to see underneath the hood. The truth is, we work with a lot of churches and a lot of staffs and do some things. And one of the things that's really interesting in church is because of the growth model that really church has been under over these last probably 20, 30 years, as far as like kind of this movement to grow. Churches have a tendency to hire quickly, hire young, and hire in maturity because they're cheaper. And at the end of the day, what we end up doing is bring onto the staff people who are emotionally immature or spiritually immature. But the problem is when you come into a staff and you're emotionally immature or spiritually immature, the weight of ministry exposes the cracks. It doesn't hide them.
That's amen.
And so like all the complexities of church relationship are like today I've got people that, I mentor, that I pastor, that I'm friends with, and even I have family on. I mean, it's so many relationships and layers. All the hats is what we call it. And so really it takes somebody who is more spiritually mature, more emotionally mature to handle all of that than it does somebody who is immature. And so we really need to slow down and make sure that when we start hiring people, especially on church staff and really any business, it doesn't really matter. We have to think about the weight that they are going to carry. And do they have the maturity to carry that weight appropriately? Because if we're not careful, then we're setting them up for failure and we're setting ourselves up for failure as well.
Yeah, I think, which do you want to talk through what we developed as a staff?
Yeah. Talk about the rules of engagement, which I think are just great rules of engagement in general.
Yeah.
Not just for a staff, but for anybody.
I'm sure there's probably a better definition of what rules of engagement are, but I mean, essentially it is pretty.
We sat down with our staff. We said, hey, this is a problem.
How are we going to interact together? What are the agreed upon rules that we're going to engage with?
Like family rules, whatever.
Yeah. The first one is respond quickly. Before I talk about you, I will talk to you.
So that means that before, and I think this is so key. Let's just talk about this for a second. One of the things that Christians are terrible about is getting offended with somebody and then going and telling 5 or 6 people, and they'll say they're getting godly wisdom and how to deal with it.
I just need help on how to navigate it.
How do I do this?
How do you navigate it? You talk to the person.
You talk to the person.
Have a conversation.
Well, how do I do that? You talk to them. When do I do that? Quickly. I mean, it's like literally.
Yeah.
Go talk to the person. And so often what we're doing is we're building
a
case of why we're right and they're wrong.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, hey, if I have an offense, the Bible is clear, go deal with it. Mm-hmm. Go touch it. Go deal with it. In fact, Jesus is so clear that in Matthew chapter 5, he says, leave your offering at the altar and go make it right with your brother.
Yeah.
If they have an offense with you. It's not just if I have an offense with them. It's if I know they have an offense with me, I'm supposed to go try to make it right.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
That's so hard.
Yeah, it is so hard. Start having to develop a list of who has an offense with me. I'm like, oh, Lord.
I had to walk that out recently.
Exactly. Somebody recently, I was talking to somebody. He's a friend. He said, if I had to develop a list of all who are offended with me, that line would start Rocky Mount. It's like, well,
I'm pretty sure that was on the baseball field.
That was on the baseball field. And we're totally, this does not include the baseball field. Baseball field does not count.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
The second one is unity is the goal. It's not about being right or wrong.
That one's hard for you.
Well, I think, yes and no. I mean, I think I've gotten to a place now where I would say in the workplace, it's not hard. I think, in a marriage and family, it's been hard, especially in the parenting front.
So, yeah.
Because we don't see eye to eye necessarily on, I think, this phase of parenting, like with a teenager. It took some work to get on the same page.
Well, there's been,
and when we weren't in unity, it really bothered me.
Well, recently, so talk through that, because I think this is great.
Which story? Which one do you want to pull out?
The one about Wes. When we were struggling to try to figure out what we were going to, how we were going to walk that out, the consequences and all that stuff.
Oh, with the phone?
Yes.
Yeah. So we, I'm trying to think how to word all of this without just sharing all his stuff. This has been a few years ago now, had some stuff that we found on his phone, and I was the one that found it. And
we were driving down the road one day.
Yeah, called you.
I was in the car in front of you.
And I was fuming.
I mean, literally, I'm seeing her little red hair fly in the wind. And I'm like, what is happening? Is there a demon back there? I was like,
fuming.
Lauren's angry.
Fuming. Oh, man.
I thought you were mad at me. Once I knew you were not mad at me, I was like, this is good. What is it? Hey, if it's Wes, sorry.
Threw him right under the bus. You're on your own. Which now is so funny. Now I understand why if we're at the house and he's trying to pit us up against each other, you're like, no, I'm not getting on your side.
I'm done, boss. You have entered into the danger zone.
Anyhow, after we kind of got things in the box per se, and we're trying to talk through what the consequences were going to be. And I think we maybe talked through on a previous episode about parenting styles and how different we are.
And this is what helped us. I mean, this is some of the stuff that got us to that place.
Yeah.
Of trying to figure it out.
And so I'm much more rigid, can be black and white. So
Yes,
I'm
you are.
Throw the phone away.
It's over.
It's over.
You're never coming back. Mom, when can I get my phone back? Never.
Never.
Electronics are dead to us in this house.
You're never getting one ever again.
Yep.
And you were much more like, oh, yeah, let's just give it a week. And I'm like, what? And so that was, for me, that was really hard. I think because I was so convinced that my perspective on it was right. And you were so convinced that your perspective on it was right. And so it took...
And it was actually both coming from, like we talked about on the previous episode, our factories.
Yeah.
And so that's where we get most ingrained, is when something we're dealing with in the current moment, we are parenting or trying to navigate out of fear that our child doesn't end up like us.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we had to learn, and this is something that is a biblical principle, is yielding and yielding to one another. And it doesn't mean that I go all the way to Lauren's side, and it doesn't mean she goes all the way to mine. In fact, most of the best decisions we've made have been in the middle.
Yeah.
But within that, we have to yield to one another. And I think the best decisions on our church staff come when we yield instead of just try to make it our way.
Yeah, but I think it also plays into a major factor into that yielding process is what this third one is, and that's listen actively. Communicate to connect.
Yeah.
And not communicate to build your case, not communicate to create a defense, not communicate. And while the other person's talking, you're trying to think through your argument about it. And that's hard at times. Especially if you like to fight.
Oh, yeah. Or if you're trying to find a win. I think a lot of times when you find people that are really getting ingrained in their way, a lot of times if you really peel back the onion, which is what we do for a living. I mean, I hate to say that, but that is some of what we do when we're helping people anyway. is that a lot of times people that are just so headstrong, they're just trying to find a place they can win because they're not winning somewhere else.
Yeah. Or they want to find somewhere that somebody will just listen.
Yep, that's exactly right. And kind of ask the questions that disarm and get to the root of what's going on.
Yeah. The fourth one is extend grace.
Oh.
Nobody wants to do that.
Nobody has time for grace.
It says value the differences in others and own up to your own biases.
Ooh.
Which again goes back to, I think how we started was, what is it like to be on the other end of you?
So how many people do you know have a positive bias? Like they always think positively. Or do you think most of us are bent more like when we're dealing with something that's hard, do we usually lean negative?
I think you lean positive.
I think I have a tendency to lean positive. You have a tendency to lean
negative.
For sure.
The world is coming down.
100% falling apart. Everything is dead. It is completely.
But I did learn that can be like a defense mechanism from, like a childhood wound or something, where you try to think through all the worst case scenarios so that you think in your mind you're prepared, even though that's really not doing anybody any good.
Yeah. I mean, but I also would say that as even positive as a person as I am, there are certain things between you and I that I will always lean negative. And I think that's what we have to realize is like when we start walking things through with people and we would say they're hard, there's a lot of times we believe the worst, not the best.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of times that we assume the worst, don't assume the best.
I think you do a really good job of, not that you always get it right. I just think your heart's always in the right place of taking people at face value.
Yeah. Which means which honestly has meant that there's several times that I've been made to look like a fool.
Yeah. Or disappointed in the person.
And I think like that's the challenging thing of navigating people.
Yeah.
Is like in our line of work, right? The truth is, if we allowed it to happen, we would become very jaded at people.
Yeah.
And
we would be walled off.
We'd be walled off.
Never have a relationship with anybody.
Yeah, I mean, we would literally do that. I mean, there's no way because people hurt us, people disappoint us, I could give you a lot of different examples of that.
Which one do we want to pull out this week?
I don't want to do any of it. I'm free of it right now in Jesus' name. Easter got me free. I couldn't preach Easter with bitterness in my heart. I had to give it up to Jesus, but I want to pick it back up.
You can pick it back up Monday.
Yeah, I pick it back up Monday. But like at the end of the day, if I'm going to do this job jaded, I shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so I think coming to that place, I think that's kind of been one of the graces of this job is that it requires me, if I'm going to do it right, to battle for my heart and allow God to battle for my heart, even with people. And, I think that's the difficult thing in dealing with difficult people. Is that the truth is to love like God loves means that we leave ourselves vulnerable to get hurt.
That's true.
And I was, it's funny, I didn't even think I was going to share this, but I was talking to Pastor Jimmy. How long ago was that? It was probably like last year when I was there. We were there and I was going through a really hard situation with somebody and invested a lot in them. And it had been a relationship. I mean, I guess I'd known the person for 10 or so years. And just it had been a long process, and it had hurt my heart. I just got hurt, and he looked at me, and he said, and
you felt used.
I felt completely used. And the truth is,
you might have been.
I might have been, and
that's the reality.
I mean, the reality hurts. I was like, oh yeah,
no need to sugarcoat it.
Yeah, and I was in that moment, and he looked at me across the table, and he said, Aaron, what would you have done different? And I said, I don't think I would have done anything different. Like, I think that I believe the best. I hope the best. I took the person at face value. And he said something I'll never forget. And it stung, and it still stings. Probably more in the last, season. And he looked at me and he said, Aaron, the test will be that next time somebody like that person comes along, will you love them differently or will you love them the same? And, that stuck with me because at the end of the day, you never know how God is using your relationship with somebody to help move them towards healing.
Yeah.
And so within all this, we could have had this huge conversation about boundaries and the wise, the foolish, and evil, which is a great teaching. Probably should do that at some point, where the Bible only, there's 3 types of people: wise people, foolish people, evil people. But with this one, we really wanted to challenge you, like in marriage, in family, in relationships, confrontation is key.
Staying curious.
Staying curious is essential. And really wrestling or trying to stay connected to someone's heart.
Yeah.
And that's how we do it. And, I love our team here, but we're all broken. We're all in need of healing. And when people are being healed, they have a tendency to get more prickly. And so stick to it. The best things will be seen in eternity and what's reaped there. And it's okay every once in a while to get slapped on the cheek and have to turn it.
Yeah. It hurts our pride, though.
It hurts our pride. But there's never been a bad day when our pride has been hurt that God isn't more glorified. So.
Yeah.